Good evening. Can I call the December 11th, 2017 Board of Education meeting to order? And the first item is we need to approve our agenda. All right, all in favor? Aye. Our first item this evening is we're going to have a session in our architect legal level.
Good evening. Kyle Hayden, Chief Operations Officer. I'm going to turn this over to Kelly here in just a second. I want to have them introduce themselves if they would, so they need a microphone maybe to do that. Okay. So also back there in the audience is Scott Kimsey. Scott's with McCown Gordon and has been assisting with project coordination to this point. So there's a handful of other people from McCown Gordon that aren't here tonight that are oftentimes in our meetings, along with Henderson Engineers. We had Doug Everhart, who's typically with us. So just want to kind of give you an update on not only Free State, but kind of give a really broad picture of where we stand right now, and kind of orient you a little bit as far as how things have progressed since we started in August. So after we hired the design and construction teams in August, we started with a bond construction kickoff meeting, brought all the team members together along with a lot of the district administration, and talked about the projects. In September, we started design on Lawrence High, Free State South, and Southwest Middle School. So if you look up there on this screen, any one of the screens, you can kind of see the different color-coded items there and get a sense for where we are on the calendar. So the purple is the design element. So like I said, we started with Lawrence High School, Free State, South, and Southwest Middle Schools in August. And with those groups, we've been meeting with a design team, a building level design team. Every one of those building level design teams has between 10 and 15 representatives on it, administration, teachers, classified staff, some parent representation also. So we meet with them every 2 weeks. We also have what's called OAC meetings, which is owner, architect, contractor meetings in my office area every 2 weeks. So those have been routine things that have happened along the way. A lot of in-between meetings with specific staff, so special education, IT. We've met with athletics in some cases, but tried to kind of hit the focus group areas of spaces that we're really going to touch more intensely to kind of get their feedback. Also social workers, counselors, and those groups. So when you look ahead from where we are right now, so we're still sitting in design on all those projects. We'll be finalizing design on both South and Southwest Middle School, which will be, I'm going to have Clark Huseman Architects here in the first January meeting to talk to you about those projects and give you an update. We'll be finalizing design on both those projects, though, in March, and bids will come shortly thereafter. Hopefully you guys will be approving bids on South and Southwest in early April. When we look also ahead, we'll be starting Liberty Memorial Central and West Middle School design about that same time that we're bringing bids. Actually, a little bit before that, so we're going to be engaging their communities within the next month. When we look at this particular project, we're hoping to have design done by April with bids shortly thereafter. And everything after that I say is tentative and subject to change. So as we remember with the elementary school projects, things sometimes unexpectedly don't go the way you want to when you bid them, but hopefully we're going to be much better this time around, but it's always unpredictable, and that could cause delays here and there. But by and large, we're in a good place. We're on the same schedule that we anticipated when we started this in August. Late May, if you keep going forward, so late May we'll be starting construction at South and Southwest and finalizing construction there by early August. So by next August, South and Southwest will be done. We'll be doing probably some early package work at Free State and Lawrence High to kind of get some things ready during the summer. But construction for Free State will be more full force by the time you get to next fall, and will continue through the next school year and be finished by August of the start of the 2019 school year. Lawrence High, when you look at those projects, you know, that's a tentative one. I mean, we are hoping to beat our timeline, honestly, and getting started, because we feel like if obviously the earlier you get started, the quicker you get finished. And so because that's, you know, drug out for a while, if things go as planned, why we may be getting an earlier start than what we anticipated. Liberty Memorial Central and West Middle School, we'll finish design on those by early fall, and hopefully be bidding those and starting construction for the summer of 19, actually, summer of 19. So we're well on our way, and I want to spend the bulk of tonight talking about Free State High School and where we are with that, where we're at right now, and actually the last time around when we went through elementary projects, we didn't give a real solid board update at this point. We're at the point of finishing schematic design, which in schematic design you're really kind of getting an idea of where all the programs are placed, kind of the general scope of the work. So how much of the building you're touching and in what capacity you're touching it. What you're going to see is different than what the master plan showed. It's very similar to our elementary projects. You know, what we showed when we looked at Hillcrest and what we looked at what we did. Actually, Hillcrest was two different things. You know, what we showed at Sunset Hill, Cordley, all the major projects, it, you know, sometimes turned out differently. And it turns out differently a lot of times because once we get in there and start having conversations with the design committee at the building level, you gauge some of their interests in some things and what's rising to the top, and all of a sudden some ideas start to percolate that you hadn't really thought about a lot before. So there's some really exciting things happening with Free State. I think by and large, the thing I'm most excited about is we're touching more of the building in a renovation capacity than we were before, and because of that, why you're going to see a bigger impact to the building. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, and Kelly's going to go through quite a few slides and try to paint the picture of where we've come along the way and the different people we've engaged to kind of come up with these ideas. So, Kelly.
Okay, as Kyle said, we basically want to walk you through where we're at and just wrapping up schematic design. The things that we want to go through today is talk to you about the initial goals that kicked off this project, who we've been engaging. Kyle went through most of those already. And then talk about some of the big ideas that have propelled us and have given the direction for this project. We'll go through the development of each of the key areas, and then we'll go into some of the detail about furniture, MEP systems. And I'll touch again on schedule at the end, but I think we went through most of that as well. So the primary project goals for this really did come from the master plan, and so we've been trying to compare all of our efforts back to this list of 6 key strategic goals. And those are to create 21st century learning environments, accommodate a growing student population, and that population is to accommodate 2,000 students ultimately at each of our high schools, provide a safe and secure campus, accommodate student privacy, create equity across the district, and then of course address any strategic MEP or other failing systems within the school. From an engagement standpoint, again, as Kyle mentioned, we've been engaging a pretty broad variety of stakeholders that are from the design construction committee level to which includes teachers, administrators, faculty, parents. We've been talking to specialists within the school, librarian, athletics department, site council, special education teachers, sustainability leaders at the district level, and of course faculty and students. The students and faculty have been largely through surveys, though we are starting a series of presentations to faculty as well to get them up to speed with where we're at. Some future engagements that we have is we'll be talking to student council next week and getting their input on where we're at. That'll be pretty much the same show that we're presenting today. So we're excited to do that, and then we'll also be having some future faculty meetings coming up in early January. As I mentioned earlier, we engaged faculty and students largely through surveys. This is really how we kicked off the project to just understand what was working and what may not be working from their perspective. We had a great turnout from both. We had approximately 25% of the student population and 35% of the faculty population respond. And within both of those groups, we had a pretty broad diversity of who the respondents were. We had a number of questions, and I'm not going to go through all of those today, but there were a few that really led to some of the key changes or some of the key things that we did within the school, and so I wanted to touch on those. One was simply just asking the question about whether or not an individual or student is an introvert or extrovert. This isn't a surprise to us with the information that we get back. This is what we would typically see, but what it does tell us is it confirms that we need to provide a variety of environments for students to learn that are both quiet spaces, open spaces, closed spaces, and maybe spaces that are more social. So that's critical kind of wherever we're touching the project. Another question that we had for students is where they thought the heart of the school was. And it's not surprising that it was generally the geographic center of the school, but what we also noticed is that it wasn't necessarily academic space. So one question is how could we recenter academic space within the school so that that became what students identified as being really the heart or the hub to their school. We asked the question about academic lockers and their current use. More than 50% say they never use their lockers, and even more say they rarely use their lockers. And so the question there is there a way to repurpose some of the real estate that those lockers currently take up to provide additional learning environments? And then we asked, when was the last time you used the library, or how often do you use the library? We asked this question to both students and faculty, and the results were simply that there were a fairly large contingent that either never use the library or rarely use it. It's not that it isn't well utilized still or that it's still busy, but we do believe that just comparing to some other benchmarks that there could be a much higher utilization of this space. Again, we think that's possibly due to the location of the library, but also the resources that it offers. So we believe fixing those two things can radically increase the utilization of that space. So based on that information, we kicked off really with kind of rethinking the organization of the school. We tried to take some of the big pieces out of the box and then put them back in. And the primary piece was the media center. So this is showing the existing location for the media center, and this is showing a proposal for where the media center would be. The location to the left of the screen is the entry dining commons, and so we would be connecting the dining commons to a stair that connects first and second floors that ultimately connects to this new media center that's acoustically separated from the rest of the school, but visually very open through glass. The other thing that this was doing was trying to create a dining facility that was integrating more learning environments, so that the dining facility was used 8 hours of the day for breakout learning purposes versus the 2 hours just for lunch. So extending what the resources would be as a library, we were asking ourselves what all could you integrate within this resource, creating larger learning pockets or pull-out spaces for students, a place for all learners, a place for self-directed learning, meaning that you wouldn't necessarily need teachers involved in what's happening in some of those spaces, a place for digital creation, student success, Obviously, a place for creating a great environment for reading and literature, for public forums or pitch space for students to present their work, and certainly creating a place that's flexible so that this media center can continue to evolve. So if we go through the various components of this, this is our starting point. And we've started to break this into smaller groups. So again, dining connected to this media stair connecting the first and second floor in a much more powerful way. Today they're pretty separated. And then starting to put some of these program pieces that we just discussed within the media center itself: pitch space, project center, genius bar, group study, individual study, quiet space. And I'm going to go through the components of that next. So this is just a graphic to show what that begins to look like. And just for orientation, where you're seeing this new media stair, this is where there's an existing staircase to get to the second floor. You don't have visual connection to the second floor in this location, but we're just reorganizing how that works. So this is a slightly more eye-level view looking at the media stair that's connecting those two spaces. Basically, these are deep treads so that you can have students that start to use this space for dining. They use this space for student breakout. They can use it for social engagement. You could have, we're thinking that there may be a large projection screen, so you could get 50 students or 100 students on this stair that begin to look at a larger presentation for a pitch space or presentation space. It would be used for a variety of different purposes. And this is just some examples of what that might look like. As we move further to the east through the library, we're integrating pitch space, again, small group space for students to present their work. This might be the size of a classroom or smaller. Checkout stations, an area that we're calling a project center. So this is more for self-directed learning or areas. It's like a soft maker space for students to do small projects. And this is just a couple examples of those types of spaces. So pitch space, which is tied to audiovisual, and then project centers, again, where you might have printers, supplies, large work surfaces. Again, moving further east into the library, integrating a space that we're calling a genius bar. This would be an area where you would get library assistants or IT assistants, bringing IT into the media center in a much more robust way. Also a way we see of increasing the utilization of the space. Creating soft seating that's open, and then a larger gathering space of approximately 30 students. This would simply be to bring a normal class into the library, very similar to the way that it's used today. And some examples of those spaces. So a support center, again, that student success, library support, IT support, quiet zones. And this is a few eye levels of the areas that we just looked at. So that pitch space is in the foreground. You can see the project tables in the background. Then a similar view showing some of the quiet space, that genius bar. And then the black and white area you see to the left of your screen is indicating breakout areas that we are creating between the media center and the primary corridors. So this is really a buffer space where there's books and breakout areas so that you create a quieter environment within the media center. And we're returning the corridors that currently look like this. That. So again, we're creating a visual connection to the media center, being very open, but for the most part being acoustically separated from the corridors. And so within those breakout areas, you would have group work or pull-out space from the classrooms. So these spaces could be used by both the media center or from the classrooms for pull-out. And this is an example of what that might look like. They're typically spaces that would seat 4 to 6 students. They would have a direct line of sight to the adjacent classrooms. And then moving to some of the other program within the school, we have a centrally located learning commons. So this is a programmatic piece that was in the original master plan. This serves as a multitude of functions. It's really a multi-purpose space for the school. It can be an area where you have all faculty meetings. It can be an area for testing. It can be more of a traditional learning commons, so an area where you have project-based learning. So you may have 1 or 2 classrooms that pull out into this space. It's larger. It allows for you to do more hands-on activities. And then this is an example of what that might look like on the left. And on the right, this is the actual space that's been carved out for that within Free State High School. And that's about 1,700 square feet. That's compared to the 700 to 720 square feet of a normal classroom. So it's a considerably larger space. One of the primary objectives within the master plan that we're certainly still carrying forward is creating tertiary or secondary and tertiary learning spaces throughout the school. These are areas outside of the primary classroom where students usually pull out to do other activities. We just know through our experience that creating those spaces directly outside of the classroom to the extent possible is when those areas are most effective, and having transparency to those areas is critical. And so we've removed lockers for the studies that we had discussed earlier in strategic locations so that we could create these learning pockets adjacent to classrooms. So you can see that they're scattered throughout level 1, on level 2, and the 3 red areas on the left side, those are the ones that are shared by the media center as well. And then this is just a rendering of what those might look like. So we've removed lockers in part of the corridor. In this particular case, we've created bench seating, so this area might seat 4 students. It'd be tied to monitors for connecting AV. And then this is just a furniture solution that's very similar to that. But we'd be providing a variety of seating environments, again, directly tied to the classrooms for secondary learning. Special education, we are moving that to the location that was vacated by the media center. So the benefits to this particular space for special education is that it's a 2-story, or it's about a 1.5 story volume in some locations, so it's taller. But also they get natural daylighting, which they did not have before. We are also able to accommodate in this particular area the diagram that we had presented back in the master plan. So we had created a new diagram in working with the district's special education group, and that would be more flexible in accommodating some of the future needs for that specific program. And to go into some of the detail, this is how that lays out. So off of the primary corridor is a kitchen and laundry facility that takes advantage of some of the restrooms and plumbing that currently exist in that location. There's a special education only corridor that's kind of off of the main circulation path, and that gives you connectivity to an autism classroom and a medically fragile classroom as well.
Ellie, can you flip back a couple screens to the, okay, can you, does everybody remember where the SPED rooms are now? A rooms that are kind of in the middle. That's where the current SPED, right there.
Good point.
Nice if we all knew the building.
Yes.
The design team.
If I'm saying something that I've lost you, please stop me and I'd be happy to go into more depth. But yes, they were basically embedded within the school, and so that program didn't receive any natural daylighting, so that we see this as being kind of a huge advantage for that particular group. These other 5 rooms that are labeled classroom, those are recaptured classrooms where media was before. So we've created classrooms to the same size standard that you have throughout the rest of the school. Again, one of the goals is to increase the classroom capacity to accommodate an ultimate population of 2,000 students. The math that has been worked out on that is to create an 80% occupancy of the classrooms when you have 2,000 students, and that's with 30 students in every classroom. So that's how we arrived at the number of classrooms in addition that you would need. Is that correctly? but what that came to is 7 additional classrooms, and you'll see in a moment that we ended up with 8. So we had achieved some additional classroom capacity even beyond what we had in the master plan. This is just a couple eye-level views of those 2 special education classrooms, the Autism Room and the medically fragile room. Again, this is just illustrating higher volume space and some of the daylighting. In moving some of the program into, or moving the Media Center program out of their current location, we've displaced some offices. So this is showing the relocation of some of those offices. And then this is how that lays out. So we've created a shared environment for the 6 faculty workers who had a shared environment before, but we have added a meeting room that they did not have before. And then creating all gender facilities was also a goal for all of the schools that are being touched in this bond issue to some extent. And so for this school, we've created 1 restroom bank that is all gender. And the way in which we are doing that is creating an environment that is open sight lines from the primary corridors, but every restroom is in its own room. They're individual rooms versus being gender specific. Looking at athletics, there's several locations where we've made improvements to athletics. So there's a 3,000 square foot addition on the north side of the building for cardio and training. That's what you're seeing on the right. The locker room renovations include taking the gang showers and converting those to an office suite. The idea of centralizing that office suite is so that you have sight lines to the students at all times. And then individual shower stalls, again, in lieu of the gang showers that they had before. Where the private offices were before, we've changed those to private changing rooms. So again, just trying to increase the private opportunities for any of the students relative to restrooms or athletic training or changing rooms.
Are these still separated in a privacy?
Privacy's added. These are still gendered as far as locker rooms. That's correct.
Has that plan gone to the student group? Or is there plans to have?
Student council will see it next week. Tomorrow. Tomorrow.
I'm wondering a little bit. I just came back from it.
Yeah.
The idea of a binary system being used, what we know of as a changing frame for gender and holding on to that may be problematic sooner than later. And so, I mean, it's just like, how final is this and how much feedback? So I'm somewhat surprised because I'm a I don't know if I just was left off or if it, I think this may warrant it.
Okay. Okay. Weight room and wrestling room expansions. So originally the addition was slated to possibly increase the wrestling room size. change has been to increase its size in the existing location and increase the weight room size in its existing location by renovating that area. And that's allowed us to be a little bit more efficient in the way that we're configuring the addition. So these are just showing the two walls that have been removed to increase the size of those two program components.
So Kelly, to go back to that, in the master plan, you've actually shown some of this space to be where you just showed us the cardio room is going to be.
Right.
But the cardio room is used by classes, right? And
Correct.
so is that the reason why the decision was made to put that more central to, this is an upstairs space, right? Kind of
It is.
on the far side of the building upstairs?
There were a series of reasons, and that was one of them.
Okay.
The other was that moving any of these programs to the addition actually created a hole here where you didn't necessarily have program to put into it. And so this was a more efficient way of arranging the program. It actually allowed us to scale back the amount of additions slightly for that athletics component. And that in combination with some of the efficiencies that we found in our addition strategy for the classroom component as well is what allowed us to do what we consider a considerable amount of additional renovation to the project, which I'll show you in a minute. So that's, to your point, that's tied really to our addition strategy for the classrooms. The master plan was showing that to the south of the building. Through a series of studies, we looked at the south of the building, east of the building, north of the building, to see how can we accommodate this additional classroom stock but do it in the most efficient way. The east side of the building ended up gaining us quite a bit of efficiency. So on this is showing the classroom layout for that. And again, this afforded us a couple things. One, it saved square footage, which saved cost that we could put into additional renovation work. It also allowed us to gain an additional classroom that we didn't count on within the master plan phase. So we have a net gain of 8 classrooms versus the 7 that were necessary to get to that 80% efficiency. So this is just a summary of the different components that we just talked through on level 1. I can come back to this. The changes that we're making to level 2. And just to go through a few more components before we wrap up, we are doing a furniture pilot for both of the high schools. The furniture pilot consists of doing basically mocking up 4 different configurations of furniture within the rooms for faculty and students to try out, and then we'll get their feedback for what they think works the best and what's the most flexible moving forward. And I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but basically it's different types of furniture, different chairs, different heights, and that allows for different configurations.
So you said there's 4 classrooms. Does that mean we're doing 2 mock-ups at each high school? Or are we doing all four at each high school? Okay. And are those all already set up or to be set up?
So I can go back to those if there's any questions, but that's ongoing. Again, it's kind of in its infancy, so we don't have anything to report from that, but that should help us guide the direction for what the appropriate solutions are for classrooms. There is some site work associated with Free State High School. The primary components of that is repaving the east parking lot. We're creating a new parking lot to the southwest corner of the school that will accommodate 100 additional cars. And then there is an ADA accessible route that connects the school to the various athletic fields to the west of the school. So right now there's several locations where you don't have either a clear path from the school across the street or an ADA accessible route to those fields. And then MEP, I'm not going to go through in great detail either, but listed within the master plan that's been published is a series of MEP improvements that were prioritized. All of those 1 through 3 prioritized MEP components were accepted in the master plan, so we are pursuing all of those upgrades. There were also improvements to either replace or repair roofing where necessary, and so that will be a part of this as well. So Kyle alluded to this, but just to go into some of the specifics, again, comparing the master plan to the schematic design, we were able to decrease the amount of new construction. A lot of that was not decreasing, in fact, it was not decreasing program, it was just increasing the efficiency and how we were gaining that program. So we were creating less corridors to get to that program and other things. In doing that, we were able to increase the renovation by over 25,000 square feet in addition to what was in the master plan. So we see that as being pretty beneficial and from the respect of touching the school in more places than not. And then just revisiting the schedule, we are about 2/3 the way through design development. This is a phase where we've, for the most part, wrapped up some of the schematic ideas, but we're starting to get into the details with our engineers in developing those ideas. And then, as Kyle said, we're about a month away from getting into construction documents where we document all of this for bidding. And that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Mic around if board members ask questions.
We have it easy compared to Lawrence, but still there's going to be disruption. So kind of wonder what the thinking is in general.
The details of that we don't know yet. It's a very good question. We're just getting into the phasing. We're just at a point where we can get into the phasing discussions with McCown Gordon. So we're sitting down to have those conversations right now. So I can't tell you exactly what the plan is. But that is the number one priority, is to minimize the amount of disruptions to the students.
I think to that point, usually what we have tried to do in the past is we do new construction when school is in progress, and then most of the remodel, especially if it's significant, would happen during the school year, or during the summer, sorry. So yeah, new construction would be the first initial phase that we would see, likely starting next fall. And Scott, you can jump in or go like this if. And then we would do like significant remodel would be the next summer. So.
And generally we do any of the new construction first. That way we can use that as space that students move into while renovation work's being done. It just gives us more real estate to work with in moving students around.
I was just wondering about the special education area.
Yeah.
Where it says sped only now. Will that still allow for students to have some inclusion when it's beneficial to them? I wasn't understanding that. Will those classrooms that are surrounding them be like gen ed and special education?
They will be, yeah.
It's also important that that's not all the special ed classrooms. Classrooms are sizes where general education classrooms are not.
So I think the whole library really have, as a board, heard some concerns from our librarians about sort of these open concepts. So I'm just curious kind of how you guys have really addressed that, like very specifically those concerns.
Sure. It's been an ongoing discussion. So we have met with the library specialists on multiple occasions now. And most of the concerns have been about the level of acoustic privacy from both the primary corridors and the dining facility itself. So in our original concepts, we didn't show much detail, so it looked like it was completely open. There's, again, there is a lot of transparency, but from an acoustic standpoint, it's for the most part separated from those areas. So we've been working with that group quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess unless there's more that gets cited, but
Yeah, I think some of the well, first of all, from the design committee standpoint, I think from just the high school design, because there's 16 people actually on that committee, and there was overwhelming support for the concept. And I think as it's being refined, you'll start to see the clearer pictures, I guess, of where there's going to be sound privacy to that. So, you know, in a lot of the visuals, when you look at it, you can't see where the glass is, because so you may go back to a slide, Kelly, and kind of get a picture. So even when you're looking at a corridor and what may look like that it's an open space, it actually isn't. So the open space really is from the learning stairs going up, and just that front part, which will largely be kind of what we refer to as a pitch space, and then a project center is kind of the next place. And then so as you go deeper into the library, you get to your private spaces where it's pretty much glass all the way along both hallways, except for an opening to get into from the corridor, one space to get into. And then there's private rooms there, collaboration learning pocket rooms that are also enclosed. There may be transparency, but they're closed in.
Plus your stacks go along. Your stacks, as you can see in the picture there, go along the outside of that to create a buffer zone between the hallway and the library. So.
The glass go all the way up to, I mean, is it a glass partition in these areas? The reason why I'm asking is we did the cool open thing in the public library, and it's kind of a big issue between.
It will stop at some threshold at the top. It won't be open air.
I mean, I'm just thinking with the corridors, with this,
Right.
you know, how lousy the not how the hallways get.
Yeah.
It's aesthetically,
Right.
you know.
It'll be close to some threshold above. Again, part of the evolution of this has been this buffer region, which is, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's kind of this width here that goes the full length of the media center. And that's created some of these more massive components of the breakout center or the stacks or reading spaces that provide some boundary between those primary corridors and the central.
I guess acoustically, I mean, I see the visual boundaries,
Yeah.
you know, where
Right. Yeah, that glass will go to the top, and there are. I mean, I don't want to give the sense that it's completely walled off. So there are a couple open spaces to the media center, but for that reason, we've created some rooms that are completely for quiet reading as well. So it's a little hard to see in these images, but toward the back, the idea is that the further you go into the library, the quieter it gets, and at the very back is completely enclosed room just for quiet study. Some of this is a takeaway from some other projects that we've recently done and created these spaces. They seem to be some of the more popular spaces within the media center. So we've tried to create ample enclosed spaces for that particular reason.
Kelly, is Henderson doing any acoustical modeling?
Yes. Yep.
And then one other question. We kind of discussed, so we're taking the media center away from the perimeter now and putting it inside. So can you speak a little bit to what we're doing to get daylighting into that space as well?
So a lot of the daylighting for this scheme is just provided from its presence to the dining facility. The dining area is heavily daylit, just given how open it is, and so we're relying on a lot of that daylight to bleed in into the media center. We are looking at trying to integrate either clear stories or skylights within this area in very select spaces where it makes sense, but that's just a part of our process to see what we can fold into this project.
students.
So, I think that's all dependent on how many lunches we have and how many kids we're serving. So, what works to our benefit right now, actually, is having open lunch. You know, if the decision was ever made to close lunch and we went to 2,000 students, I would expect us to have some issues. You know, but it would also be capacity of just the cafeteria itself. Quite honestly, some of these design changes are going to help with capacity in the cafeteria because the learning stairs could serve as a place for students to continue to spread up towards the Library Media Center. So it's really increasing our square footage quite a bit for that space. As far as, just how we serve, I think, we probably serve in the most efficient way we can right now with kind of the come in and scatter. And so it's not currently an issue, but with some policy changes and things like that, then I think we could be looking for some opportunity to probably address that.
Okay. We're being televised, which is why we keep passing the microphone around so that it's okay.
Remind me, I forget where the elevators are. Like I love the inviting nature of that media center, but I'm wondering if I was in a wheelchair and wanted to access that, where would I go? I forget.
It's not in this picture, is it?
Okay.
Right there.
So would you go up there and then around in order to?
If you were coming in you're wondering if you're coming in the main door and then going to the media center, for example? Yeah. So this is the main entry. This is your secure entry that was just created in the last bond effort.
Okay.
And you would be coming down the primary circulation route to the middle of the building and then back.
One more question, just kind of. I just need to talk better. Oh, there we go. Okay. I can do this, I promise. I'm also curious that furniture configurations, I noticed quite a few that had high tops.
Yes.
And I do think that that can be fun, and I do think that they're inviting to students, but I worry if we have quite a few of those that leaves students who are in wheelchairs just unable to participate in those types of areas. And I noticed in breakout spaces that sometimes that was kind of the option. And so I just want to make sure that we're keeping an eye to inclusivity and to making sure that.
Yeah, and you're talking about the media center specifically or the classrooms?
I was actually talking about the 4 classroom configurations that you're kind of bringing in. I'm just wondering if when we kind of go through that, we're not just like, oh, wow, this looks cool and this is fun without thinking and having the lens of can all students participate.
It's definitely been a discussion point, so we're cognizant of making sure that we're accommodating. I think in general the strategy is to try and create as much diversity of options for students as we can. So some of those may include high top tables, but certainly there'd be options that are lower or accommodating for those in wheelchairs and with other disabilities. The same as with the media center. The media center, we're just showing right now, at this particular phase, we're just showing furniture so that we can begin to populate it, so we can give you a sense of what it looks like, but we have not started to go through the exercise of seeing exactly what furniture makes sense within those spaces. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Kelly just touched on it a little bit, but the diversity in the furniture. So in every one of the classroom mock-ups that we're doing, the pilot rooms, there's a variety of different furniture that we don't go exclusively tall tables. So we do some tall tables. Some of those are adjustable, even adjustable height, so you can manage that. Some of our stools are even adjustable height in there. But then we're also doing rectangles, triangles, different things like that. And honestly, the rectangles that seat 2 or the triangle tables actually have a wider clearance than what our current desks do, which make it more accommodating than what our current furniture setup. The current just rectangle desks aren't probably as suitable to a student in a wheelchair.
Okay, we're approaching the time that we need to take a break and reconfigure our room here. So unless there are any other burning questions, we'll stop here for tonight, and I'll call a break until 7 o'clock when we convene for the rest of our regular meeting. Thank you very much for being here. This is really helpful. I hope the board felt like this was helpful to get an idea of where we are now instead of waiting until we're at the point where we're being asked to sign off on bids and whatnot for the projects. And as Kyle mentioned earlier, we're going to do this again with regard to the 2 middle schools, South and Southwest Middle School, at our first January meeting to get an update from them on where we're at, kind of at the same stage of progress with Clark Huseman. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we are in break until 7 p.m.